Hey guys, it's Linda Winter with another Winter Designs. I have a new template for you. I love this one. This one whips up so fast. Of course, it's one of my projects, so fast and easy. This is half of my bottle holder. Now this can hold bottles of wine, bottles of water. I've got whatever kind of a specialty wine, specialty liqueur. Over here, this is one of those coffee liqueurs. I love putting all the coffee flavored syrup. I love putting these in here, and I gave Lisa one of these the other day. I should have made it to put in one of these little guys here. I should have made her one of these and stuck this inside. Instead, I just gave her one of these. So whether you are into olive oil or really nice coffee or really nice wine or really nice liqueurs, whatever it is, including my thermos, I just figured out that my thermos will go in here as well. So if you are giving somebody a thermos of hot cocoa or hot spiced rum or whatever it is that you've made for them, then this is a great carrier. I know you guys have seen these before. I just want to show you how to make them faster and easier with our templates. So it's a Winter Designs template, which means no slipping, no kidding, just like Martelli. But if you notice, this is the front black and this is the back black. Most of Martelli templates have this no slip material that we call brown. This brown grabs. You can see how I'm pushing. Well, guess what? So does the black. The black and the brown, they're interchangeable. They work equally as well. So whatever color it is, just know that this means no slipping, no kidding. So I'm going to take this out and I want to show you a couple different options. You can do one solid piece of fabric if you want to, but you can also do two fabrics. I'm going to show you how to do the two fabric. We'll talk about the one fabric. So the way we're able to do that, I'm going to put this in our sweet spot over here, and hopefully you can see these two lines. You can go in with one of our metallic Sharpies and you can go color in these lines. Our Sharpies that we have here, they let you highlight so you can see. Also up here, fold. Now I'm doing rough on top of here because it's just to catch my eyes. Fold. I don't want to cut my fabric along that edge. Well, I can put a seam in there if I need to, but I'd rather remember, hey, you've got a fold line there, and that means place the fabric on the fold. But these two lines here, that's where my fabrics will be. Let's pull this one over here. My boxed bottom down here, and again, this has a cut mark and a cut mark. Martelli's technology that is just amazing allows you to cut in the corner, cut in the corner. If you used any other template, acrylic, otherwise, when you use a rotary cutter, you would stop cutting right about here and you would stop cutting right about here. But because we have these cut lines, that means I can cut to here and cut to here. Inside of here, that's going to allow me to cut. Now there may be a thread or two, we'll see that, but it allows me to cut so accurately those corners. Okay, so let's take a look at the fabric here, and you can see this box bottom is down here. But I'm basically going to be placing this fabric where it's about to here when I cut, and this fabric is going to be about to here. That means there's an overlap. So this guy there versus this guy where I use the whole template. So let's grab our fabrics. I just want to tell you how I kind of was working the other day when I made this. So I saw my fabric stash and I thought, oh, these would be great. And I wanted this fabric on the outside. Well, when I made it and I had that fabric on the outside, it just didn't have much punch. So I decided to put it on the inside. Now, the next time I make this though, what I'm going to do is this. You can see down here, I've got the coffee work wine, repeat, coffee work wine, repeat. When I stitch this together, I'm basically going to be looking at my fabric and deciding what it is that I want. Do I want this bottled up? I don't like to keep things bottled up. Do I want that on here? So I'm looking to see where this is. And notice how much fabric I have. This is going to be here. So if right about here is where this fabric needs to start, then I would be cutting this off right here. So this guy here, I would be stitching on at the sewing machine. Let's see, we want this to go in the right direction. That would help. I'm going to be stitching this like this, stitching that together. Whatever that is, when I stitch that together, when I place this on, I'm basically looking at right inside of here. this, having this fabric where my seam allowance, imagine those are sewn together, that's basically going to be right inside of there. My seam allowance from here, my seam allowance from there. And then when I go to cut this, I'd have this sewn together and I could cut just like that. Okay, so we are going to do that with one that I've already put together. Let's talk about our interfacings, our materials inside. You can, if you want to, use this cool stuff. What is this? This allows you to keep your drinks cooler or hotter, depending on what it is. If it's hot coffee, if it's, cold bottle of wine, you can use this for your interfacing. Is it going to make a huge difference? Not really, because it's open at the top, but it might help. So if it's a hot summer day, that is a nice option for you. I'm going to be using this interfacing that I like. So you can see here, I've already sewn my red and my owls together, and I've sewn my red and my owls together. I've top stitched here, and then I fused it onto here. So when you fuse with any kind of fusible, make sure to not ruin your iron that you grab one of these. This is my amazing sheet. I sell it in a giant size, and my amazing sheet, it's from Bo Nash. You might already have these. These guys here, when I press, this stuff won't get on my iron and ruin my iron. Or if I'm pressing down, it's not going to get on my ironing mat and ruin my ironing mat. One of the things I like to do with this is I place that down here, I place that on top, and then I press. So I like the largest size, so I can press just like that. All right, so I've gone ahead and I've got those two pieces. This is my outside. My inside, you'll notice, this interfacing here is much more lightweight. This is an SF101 or a shirt fuse. This stuff here and those two work really well. Now, if you're going to be carrying these and traveling a lot somewhere, then fusible foam would be the right thing to have. So fusible foam would give you the most protection. One bottle batting around inside, if you're just doing this lightweight, it's not going to give you a whole lot of protection. So even this here, this interfacing that I have, it's a little bit, but it's not a whole lot, but it is going to help. So what are we going to do first? We're going to go ahead and cut one of these. Let's just go ahead and cut that apart, and we're going to cut, I need two of these. So what are we going to do? We're going to fold in half. When we fold in half, what I want to make sure that I do is give myself enough fabric and especially line up these guys here. I'm looking at this seam, and I want to make sure those are lined up. When I think that's pretty good, I'm going to go back to this. This is going to go right on here. And we're looking at our fold right along the edge of the fabric. Now, here's the deal. This curve is pretty steep. So we're going to grab a pencil, a pen, a chalk pen, whatever it is, and we're going to mark that. So we're going to go look at this. Remember what we were doing here? I want to scoot that down just a little bit so it gives me the right amount of green on the bottom. When I think I'm good, then I'm going to go ahead and just draw on here. I would rather have this than damage my template. And let me see if I move that around. You can see there I've got a little bit of pencil line, and I think we're good. All right, so we're going to do that just as a precaution. Now you could use a 60mm rotary cutter if you wanted to. It's going to give you more support here and here, especially if you're doing foam, but it's going to do you no good there. The 28mm might possibly work. It's totally up to you as to how many of those you want. Remember our no-slip material, when I turn that grabbing keeps that all together. Okay, so we went up into that cut. I'm going to turn this. These fingers are not here in the way of that blade. These fingers are further away so that I don't have to worry about slicing my fingers. Okay, you can see I've cut most of that, but I've got a little piece that's hanging on there. It did cut that piece off, so we'll cut those with scissors, no big deal. All right, because I have that along the edge there, we're going to get that out of the way. I'm going to make sure that I didn't pull my fabric off of this edge of the template. And we're going to go in and we're going to cut a little bit here. Now, right about there, I start hitting the template. So we're going to stop and we're going to come up here. We're going to cut that off. We're going to turn this in the opposite direction. and I'm going to cut here. Now I'm a lefty, so I'm going to be cutting a little bit different than you guys. If you're right-handed, you're going to do a little bit differently than me. So just think whatever it is I'm doing, your right hand is going to be there. Can you see how right inside of there I've got a little bit of fabric left? I can try with the rotary cutter to clean that up, but that's where I have those marks that are there for me. And again, I'm looking along that edge to make sure that that template hasn't moved. If any of that needs to be cleaned up, I can do that with scissors afterwards. All right, so we're going to take our snippets. We're going to snip that little, see that little piece right there? There's not much there at all. So we're going to snip that off. So those cut marks that we have built in make all the difference in the world for that box bottom. We're going to repeat the process. I'm going to line up those two sides over here. And we're going to give it a good fold. We're going to place that on top. I'm going to look to see where I am here, but then the other thing I'm going to do too is I'm going to pull this over. I want to see when I line that up, does this line up with that seam right here? Can you all see what I'm doing? I'm just double checking. If I really have that on there accurately, you can see this template is actually a little bit higher. So we're going to scoot that up just a little bit. I'm not so concerned about those seams lining up exactly perfectly, but you know, it is one of those things that is nice to have when you've got that template that's built in. Okay, so I haven't marked with my pencil yet. What I'm going to do is just go ahead and get some of this out of the way, and then I'm going to grab that pencil and we're going to get those consistently. All right, we've got that there. And I'm going to come up to the side and the top. We're going to look to see that that's lined up. All right, now we're going to grab that pencil. Now my pencil mark that's here, that's part of my seam allowance, so it's no big deal that I'm on the right side. And I like pencils because it's a pencil. You know, I can see it, but it's not going to be too dark for me to, you know, go through my mat, damage my mat, or anything like that. Okay, so let's take a look. We've got a nice clean one there, and then all we need to do is snip this off. All right, so let's talk about our lining. Our lining, all right, so I've folded my fabric, so I've got one piece here. Let's open this up. You can see I've got my front, my back. They both have my SF 101 on here. I'm going to fold this, giving me enough fabric, but not too much waste. And we're going to place that along the fold. And again, we're still going to do the marking because our rotary cutter, this is still a lot of bulk. So we'll go ahead and square this off. And again, I'm looking along here. I know you guys can't see that, but I need to see right under my eyes to make sure that that's nice and straight. I'm going to cut that one. I'm going to cut up here, and we're going to make sure we get all of that. I'm going to come over here. Now we're going to go ahead and mark here, just like we did before, except that this time around I didn't cut my box bottom. Every time you cut, hey, guess what? Do it a little bit differently. It breaks up the monotony. If you're going to be making 227 of these, I don't know why 27, but you know, let's say you're making these as a business and those are the number of orders that you've got coming in. You know, you cut it from one side, then you cut it from another, so no big deal. All right, so you can see here, I need to trim off that a little bit. All right, we're going to come back here to that bottom and cut inside. Make sure your fingers are not in the way and cut that. And you can see we got that bottom there. I just need to get that corner. Let's get that out of the way. All that excess that you have, you know, we're just finagling with it. Now right inside of here, I think we're pretty good. Those are all just stragglers. Okay, what are we doing? This method that I'm going to teach you how to join, I think is really cool. I haven't seen anybody do this before, so I am thrilled to be showing you a method. And you guys might say, been there, done that, Linda, no big deal. All right, what are we going to do? We're going to be joining our tops. That's our first thing. So we're going to join a top to a top. Once we join those tops, And you can see here, do you see how this is a little bit wider because I didn't go in and trim that? That's okay, because we'll fix that as we go. When we join these, then we're going to come back to the cutting table and we're going to pin and sew a little bit differently. This is pretty good. And I actually may just stay over at the sewing table and do that there. Let's see if we can do that. So we're going to join these over at the sewing machine. I'm going to grab a couple tools. If I decide to stay here, I'm going to grab a couple tools that I know I need. This is a pusher. This pusher that Philip made for me. Push, prod, shove, pull, manipulate, flip, turn, guide. You guys have heard me say that about Martelli's Sew-Mate. The Sew-Mate's amazing, but there are always other ways that we need, or other tools that we need for other places. This is one that I love. If you bought this from me, this is a really great project for you to use. Okay, so my seam allowance here, I want to increase the stitch length. Let's get the sewing machine active. This machine turns off a little bit. It goes to sleep, I should say. All right, so I'm going to use, it's probably 1/4 of an inch, maybe a little bit wider seam allowance. And we need to back stitch, so I'm just going to flip this over and stitch this all over again. All right, so we have done our outside, and now we're going to join our lining. And if you are going to be using the foam, you want to remember your seam allowance will need to be adjusted if you're doing foam in one and not in the other. The other one, if you're not doing foam in the other, but you are doing foam in one, then you want a wider seam allowance than the one that does not have foam. Okay, remember at the ironing board. So if we were at the ironing board, I'd be pressing. This is where I'm going to grab Philip's tool. I have an interfacing on here that is really pretty stiff, but this tool does a pretty good job of folding that down. I'm just going to right now, though, go tack that in so I don't have to fool with that later on. I'm going to do that on both sides here. I'm going to do that on that other one because of the turning process that I'm going to be showing you. Again, I don't know if you guys have done this method that I'm going to show you, but when I figured it out, I saw it done in a different project than this, and I thought, I wonder if that would work for this. And it does. It's really cool. Okay, so again, I'm going to use this tool to just crease that down a little bit. It's got a nice flat edge. And again, your iron is really the best tool that you have for these things, but I don't have it right next to me here. Set up your sewing station where you have an iron right next to you, where you have your cutting mat, a small cutting mat. Martelli makes an 18 by 24, but we also make a smaller one than that now, so you can set those up. Or if you have our turntable, that turntable is amazing to have as well. Okay, so we've got this seam, we've got this seam. What do we want to do? We want to line these up together. Now, normally you would have this open and you'd be turning through here later on. What we're going to do, though, is we're going to be turning elsewhere. That's all I can say is turning elsewhere. So I'm going to put a pin in. Once you see this, it'll start to make more sense. Now, one of these sides, I had a wider, a little bit more of that neck. So I'm going to look to make sure these line up right. I'm just looking at, right now, this area here and not the sides at all. We're not doing anything with the sides yet. But what I do want to do is make sure that here, I can feel I've got a little bit of a lip there. See that little bit of a lip? Okay, so I'm going to, let's see. Yeah, I think my seam allowance is still good. All right, get that needle in and get rid of that pin. Back stitch a little bit because we are going to have stress here because we are going to be turning later on this. I've got a curve and I've got a foot that is not for a curve, but we're just following along that edge. Take your time so your seam allowance is going to be consistent. And when we get to that middle, we're going to get rid of that pin. We have stitched it down, so hopefully that's going to keep that nice and flat for us. And my curve starts again, so we're going to take our time on that curve. And at this point, I want to kind of line up for the other side as well. We're going to look down at that bottom. And you can take the time to pin everything. We're going to be unpinning it, so it won't really matter. Just make sure that everything else kind of lines up right. And when we get to that edge, again, we're going to back stitch here. Okay. We're going to repeat the same thing on the other side. We're going to look at that center. And you can see how this side, there's not quite as much there. You can see where I cut in a little bit. That fleece that's there, not the fleece, but the batting that I use, this is a little bit stiffer and it's a little bit heavier when I cut through those layers. So it's sliced up a little bit. You noticed I only pinned half of this. I'm okay with that. So if you need more pinning, then you can go ahead and pin all of it. I basically got the main part of this pinned for me. And once I get that, I'm going to align things up as I go. Okay, so I want to take the time now, make sure everything is good. I'm just going to hold these together as I stitch. Okay, pinking shears. Make sure you've got a trash can. I don't have a trash can anywhere nearby. Grab a trash can. Show that all these little snips that you have. And these are the stiff shears. Get yourself a good pair of pinking shears. I have a good pair that moves easily in my hands. These are just stiff. So if you've got a pair that's really, really stiff, give them to somebody else that you know is not going to be using them. And say, I got you a gift. And then get yourself a pair, try them out, and make sure you find a good pair. I've got a pair at home that, oh man, they're like butter. You know that saying, like butter? So, all right, so I did one side and tried to get most of my trash in my little trash ditty over here. And we're gonna pink, pink, pink. Yeah, I don't know if you can tell, but already it just glides a whole lot easier. So again, if you've got tough ones, they don't have to be tough. I grew up with tough pinking shears thinking that they had to be hard. So if you're like me, pinking shears do not have to be tough. They still work beautifully. This has a smaller pink to it. I don't know if it's going to make a big difference in here or not, but I just want to have turning space. Okay, remember this tool that I talked about? Get yourself a good turning tool. I like this one because we're going to use this point and we're going to use this point. So what are we going to do? I'm going to reach inside and in this neck, that little neck, I'm going to pull out this whole thing all the way through. I know it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but when you see what it does, it'll be like, okay, this is pretty darn cool. All right, so I'm going to work at it and just work at it and work at it and work at it. When you get to where you don't feel like it's moving anymore, or you think, oh my gosh, I might rip my fabric, then stop with the point and go with the flat edge. So get yourself a tool like this. Philip made, I don't know, 50 of them for me or something, and I sold all of them. This is the only one that's left. And I said, you know, well, why aren't you making me any more? And he says, because nobody's buying them. And I said, well, I took them off my website because there weren't any more. So if you want one, put some pressure on me so I can put some pressure on him. Now, what am I doing inside of here? I'm moving this way and then this way because it has kind of a pointed, see an angled edge there? So I don't want to put too much stress on the fabric in one direction versus the other. And when I get to where I think I can start pulling fabric out, then I'm going to pull. And we're not there yet. So I'm going to go back in. Let's see if I can just grab a little bit more. And when you get to that point where it starts to turn, boy, it's like, ooh, it's going to work. At the beginning, you think this is not going to happen, but it will. There, can you see how I'm starting to pull? What this is going to do for you is give you a really nice finish at the top. Not that finish that you've probably done before where the seams don't line up accurately. Okay, my tip is right in here. So what am I going to do? I'm going to let go and I'm going to go to the outside because this is going to be ready for me to start pulling. And then I can pull this whole thing out. Do you see how it's opening up? And when I pull that whole thing out, guess what's going to pop out too? My tool. There it is. Okay, so here at the ironing board, let's start to get this thing done and make it pretty. All right, so this is what we've got so far. We've got this really nice join here. You can see how my seams line up and my seams line up, and I didn't have to do it. I did it at the sewing machine quickly and easily. So let's talk about pressing. What I want to do is come back to the corner here. And because I'm on my wool mat, I can take a pin and stick a pin in it. And over here, I'm going to open up this seam as much as possible, finger it a little bit, and stick a pin in it. This is only for pressing. I just want to get these all nice and finished because this is really the most important time for me to go ahead and get all of this taken care of. It's going to be harder to do anywhere else. We're going to put a pin in that. We're going to come back here and again open up that seam and put a pin in it. Now those pins are temporary, no big deal if I don't have them in the right place. This is only to hold this down so I can start pressing. All right, what do we want to do? I want to have all those seams open. So again, finagle your fabrics. Right now I'm just working right on here. And ooh, that iron is hot. So I want to finagle that fabric. You can see how that I need to lift up a little bit. And I don't want that back coming around to the front, but I also want those seams completely wide open. So we're working on that side. Now I'm going to come back over to the other side. And we're just looking at those seams. And I'm going to give this a little bit of a twist here. It looks like it's flipped over a little bit. And all we want to do is just make sure those seams are nice and pretty. Okay. Now, once we've gotten those seams good, that's when we're going to give everything else a good press. And then I want to show you how this that we have here is going to turn into a bottle bag. And a really cool and really easy bottle bag. All right, so we are good here. We're going to grab. Now, I probably need more pins, but we get the idea. We're going to grab these together. And we're going to sew the box bottom. We're going to sew the side and continue to sew the side. And we're going to sew the box bottom. And then over here, we're going to sew the side. And when we get to here, this is the lining. We're going to stop here, and we're going to stop here and leave that space as our opening. So I'm going to put a couple pins in here, and then we'll go back to that sewing machine. I'm pinning a corner. I'm pinning a corner. And I'm going to work on this side first. This is the outside, and we're going to pin that bottom. Again, pins or clips, doesn't matter what it is you want to do. I've got one more pin over here, so I'm going to put one more pin here. And you can see this really didn't get pressed real well, so I'm going to take a moment and press that. And I just want to go back over and talk about this method for just a second so you can see. Inside of here is the bottle handle. When I sew all of this together, this seam, the bottoms, that bottle opening, this handle is done and it's inside. So this is going to make everything faster, easier, better. I mean, to me, it just doesn't get any better than that. You know, I like tricks. I like little tips and tricks that make what you do faster, easier. So let's get to the sewing machine and stitch this up. All right, I am going to sew the bottom first. And I've got my seam allowance already set. We're going to back stitch here. We're going to do our side. And if you want a thinner bag, if you want a thinner bag that holds that bottle tighter, this seam allowance can be increased and this seam allowance over here can be increased. Not a ton, but I could go up to a 1/2 inch seam allowance if I wanted to. And then my box bottom would just be a little bit different to work with. What that would allow me to do is have a bottle held snugly. Now what I'm doing here too when I'm approaching this is I'm looking on the underside to see that my seams line up here. You could, if you wanted to, start right there instead of starting at the bottom. Because I'm using the template, I know this is all going to line up pretty consistently because I have that template that gives me cuts that are perfect. All right, we're going to do this now bottom here. When we get to that next side, that's when we're going to leave that opening. And if they're not lined up right, because I've got that bulk in the middle, I'm just lining everything up right here. You know, those handles, they want to move your fabric, and that's okay. We're just making sure everything is aligned. I'm going to flip this over and go on the other side so I can sew for a little bit before I have to do that box or the opening for my turning. And I'm looking ahead to make sure that these line up nicely. And figure about a 3-inch, 2.5 inch or so opening. I'm going to back tack here. I'm going to cut my threads. Close to the bottom is where I like to have that opening. So it's not going to show from looking down inside that bottle holder. All right, so time to do our box bottoms. Now, you can trim, you can pink, you can press those seams. What I'm going to do is flip all this over and pull. I want my seam allowances to line up. Instead of trimming, I'm going to take the easy way out and I'm pushing this to the side. I'm going to pin here. And I'm making sure when I sew that that other one is going the opposite direction. Same seam allowance that we used before. And my needle is off a little bit, so when I back stitch, I'm going to get a little bit closer to that. All right. And I just want to make sure that this is straight as I sew. And again, I just have that fabric one direction in one way. The top is in one direction and the bottom is in another. We're going to do the other side. When you get on a roll with these assembly line, boy, you will be able to whip these out really fast. Cut, 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 cut. Press, well, press first, you know, the process. So take your time, but boy, assembly line will go really, really fast with this. And I think this is a great gift. You know, I have gotten these before and I have bought these before, but I've never made these before. And the several that I've made up just to get comfortable with testing to make sure my template was right, the right size, the right height, the right width, that the box bottoms are right. I really like this. And I think this is going to be one of those go-to gifts. You know, if you've got to give somebody a Secret Santa gift, you know, a nice, you know, whether it's olive oil or coffee liqueur or, you know, anything. I like to shop, hate to name drop, but Tuesday Morning, Ross, those kinds of things, they have bottles of all kinds of goodies. I even bought bottles of popcorn that they sell in like wine bottles. And I may do a popcorn theme, which I think would be really cute. Okay, let's get that back stitching. All right, I don't know why I cannot sometimes get this to back stitch. It's user error, so I'm going to go back a little bit. I want my seam allowance there to make sure this is nice and consistent. This is the lining that we're working on now. So I've done one side of the box bottom. We're going to flip over to the other side, and then we're going to turn this thing inside out and see what this looks like. And again, they go really fast. If you didn't have me talking and showing, I could whip these up super, super fast. Okay, so we've done our stitching. What would we really do? Snip, 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 cut all those seams, get all that bulk out. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to reach inside here, and I'm going to pull the handles. So I've got my handles. I'm going to start pulling. Now, this is inside out. This red that I have here is inside out. It doesn't matter. I got to pull it all out anyway. So it doesn't matter what I grab. We're going to be pushing through and getting our box bottoms nice and finished to make sure everything is sewn up nicely and those corners are really nice and open. So we're going to do all of that. So we're going to be popping this out here. And you can see I'm just kind of manipulating all this fabric around here. And can you see how it's starting to take its shape? All right, in a minute, I need to get back over to that ironing board, but what I want to do is show you what I do on this. I don't like doing this on the storage pods because the storage pods show. The storage pods, I use glue for this, for closing this opening, but I'm going to pop through here with my thumb, pop through with my thumb on all of those corners. So I've got my 4 corners here. I'll reach through on the other side and do the same there as well before I close that opening. But when I close the opening, sewing that closed, because it's so far at the bottom, it really doesn't show that much. You can sew by hand, but I'm going to do it by machine. And you notice here I'm just pushing. My thumb won't go all the way down in there, so I'm using my pointer finger. And that's where that stiletto would be really handy as well, but fingernails work too. Okay, so we're going to come back to here. So this guy here, once you get everything pushed out, we're going to finger here and finger here. There's my seam allowance, there's my seam allowance. If I pull that seam allowance, let's get those lined up right. When I pull, it starts to go in. I'm going to give it a little bit of a helping hand here and here. And I'm going to take my stiletto, because I'm not at the ironing board. I'm just going to press that down there. And at the sewing machine, this is where I stopped. That's where I started. So I'm going to, again, kind of edge stitch right along that edge. I'm just holding my machine in place for a second to lock those stitches in. I'm looking to see where I stopped. I'm going to hold that in place again. All right, cut those threads. Back to the ironing board. And I'm going to grab my ham. And now we're going to start to turn. We're going to start to turn right sides out. So I'm sticking that bottom inside, twisting the handles, finagling this so that it becomes a cute little bag. I'm just pushing inside, giving this a good press just with my fingers at this point. Let me get that iron, make sure that iron is hot. Yep. I like an iron that stays on. You just have to remember to turn it off, or you may come home to no home. So what am I doing? I'm just pushing out those sides. Now, because of the way that we did this, it means I don't have to do any top stitching. That doesn't mean you don't have to, but you don't need to. Okay? I shouldn't say you don't have to. That doesn't mean you don't. What's the word that I want? You don't have to. Yeah. So if you want to, you can. So notice what I'm just doing here. I'm kind of going from left to right, just on the outside. And then in a second, we're going to put this ham inside and get those box bottoms a little nicer. All right, so that ham goes inside. And with the ham, I'm scooting it to the side, and I'm just going to hold. Now I'm just going to hold it down. And take the time to press, but you get the idea. We're going to move that ham around. And the nice thing about a ham is it works in your hand. Let's see if I can flip it to the other side. So I mentioned top stitching. Because I top stitched the green and the owls together, I probably would top stitch around here. But again, you don't have to on this. I haven't top stitched on any of the others that I did. So it's a decision that you can make based on the project at hand and see whether it needs it or not. All right, so you get the idea. I'd spend a little bit more time pressing, but I want to show you this, and we'll go back over to the cutting table. We're jumping around a lot. All right, so imagine that this is some amazing gift right here, and it's heavy, and it's ready to go. So this guy here, this guy here, this guy here, these are our bottle holders. You decide what kind of goodie you're going to put in there. Are you going to make some homemade, wonderful, hot creation? Or are you going to run to the store right before you go to that party and pick something up that you know that they'll like? Whatever way you go, you can't go wrong with these really cool bottle holders. So you can get this at winterdesigns.com. It's a new template. It's called the bottle holder. Great for so many other items. You can stick little goodies in there. It doesn't even have to be a liquid. So I hope you have a great time with this. No slipping, no kidding. Have fun.